considering we're about to have a conversation about how to make money, we think it's only appropriate we explain how you made yours at such a young age. Considering a little bit of context, how old are you?
24.
24. So on the top of your X bio or Twitter bio, whatever we want to call it, there's a thread that begins with, I made $60K and lived for free for 2 years while attending college. So walk us through those thread of actions that got you to that place. So I guess to start, where did you get that initial capital that you began investing?
So I started in high school with my dad. We started a real estate company. So we started doing flips one summer, like I think it was my sophomore year of high school. My dad bought a house because we had gone to some like real estate seminar, and basically he bought a house for like $20K, and we spent all summer redoing it, like watching YouTube videos and like rewiring outlets, literally doing everything. And I get up there, and my dad wake me up at like 6:30 in the morning, go over there, work till like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd walk over to the school to go to football practice, walk back after football practice, work till like 7, 8 at night, go home. Some nights we'd be there till like 2 a.m. like because my dad's really particular about if there's a job that's we're working on, we have to finish it before we can go home. And sometimes we'd be like wiring in the basement, and you can't like leave exposed wires out. So I'd be there like 2 a.m. like falling asleep, like standing on a bucket, wiring something. And I hated it. But we kept doing that, and I started to enjoy it a little bit more. The reason I hated it is because I was working long hours, first of all. And second of all, my dad was obsessed with me learning delayed gratification, so he wasn't going to pay me. So I got $0 for like working that whole summer. He's like, when I sell the house, I'll give you $1,000. And so I ended up working like 100, well, more than 100 hours, like probably 200-300 hours that summer.
Yeah.
And made like $1,000 like 6 months later. So I was like, this is terrible, and I hate this, and I went out. So he started paying me like $10 an hour on our next like couple flips. And then it came time to like apply for colleges, and at school I went to, like, it wasn't very common people went to college. So I was like, I probably won't go to college. But my parents were obsessed. Like, I had to go to college. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to pay for it, because I was like looking at the prices, and University of Illinois ended up being like 120 grand for just for the classes, not even including like living expenses. I wouldn't be making any money. So I like saw that, and it seemed like a terrible financial decision for me to spend 120 grand plus living expenses, minus the fact that I would not be making any money on the back end working a job, unless I did some like side thing, which we'll get into. But so basically I was like, this is a terrible financial decision. So how can I pay for college? I could either like get a scholarship and go to some probably like kind of garbage school, because I mean the high school I went to, there's like really no opportunities for good scholarships. I could probably got one to like some D3 school, but I thought the learning opportunities there were pretty low, and so it just didn't seem like a financially responsible decision. So my junior year, going into senior year of high school, I joined the National Guard, because they would pay for 100% of college, and then they also pay like a stipend every month. So I took a year off between senior year of high school, freshman year of college, worked in like on an army base for like 8 months, came back, worked in a factory for 6 months, saved basically all that money, came to college, met a friend, and we're sitting down at breakfast like 2 weeks into knowing each other. And I was like, well, I've been thinking about like maybe buying a house and renting out to some people so that way I can like save money on rent. Going into like, you had to live in the dorms freshman year, so I did that. After that, I was like, I don't want to pay for rent for the next 3-4 years. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna buy a house. And he's like, oh, I'll join you. And I was like, sure. He's like, yeah, my mom's a realtor. She'll help us find one. Like,
wow.
2 weeks later, we're looking at houses together. Know this kid for like a month total. We end up looking for houses. We find one, ugliest house on the street. We hated pretty much everything about it except for the price. So we ended up buying that. And I spent the next 2.5 years renovating it, basically, little by little. I spent like a whole summer, that winter break, doing it like full time so that we could get people moved in. We moved like 3 or 4 people in, and throughout the period of living there, we had a bunch of different roommates that paid us rent, paid for all the expenses, paid for the taxes, insurance, everything, and a little bit more, and that funded like our renovations. Ended up selling it. The market went up like a ton, so we made like 2.5x on our money, which was pretty great. And then, I mean, I also lived for free, if you consider that as well. That also saved me a bunch of money, like $800-900 a month for 2.5 years, 3 years.
Damn. When'd you sell it? Like right after you
Right before
graduated?
senior year.
Oh, okay.
So I lived on campus senior year.
Okay.
And then that capital then allowed you to go into more properties that you have since gone into, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is with Aiden, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So what did that look like? And I guess how did that? Because any partnership or going in on a deal together, obviously someone has to initiate it. And like, how did that like idea come about?
So basically, like the plan from the beginning was to invest a bunch into real estate, and build up a portfolio, and then like work a job, and then funnel that extra capital into building a portfolio until eventually that portfolio covered all my living expenses, and then go full time into building that portfolio long term. So that first house was like a catalyst for that is the plan. So I was planning on investing. I looked at a bunch of places during that time. I couldn't really get a loan because I was like 19 years old, and so nobody would loan me money. So I had to pay cash for properties. And I looked at a couple that, looking back on them now, like one of them was a duplex that they were selling for like 200, and it's probably worth like 350 now. And they've done nothing to it, and I would have put some money into it, and probably worth like 400 now. So I'm like kicking myself for not starting earlier. So like if anyone listening, if you have like something that works and is like makes money, like just do it and just keep doing it. But I was like looking at the market, and I'm like, okay, things look overvalued, which looking back now, like things have almost gone up like 30, 45, 50% since then. So
Hindsight is 2020 though.
Exactly. But to answer your question, that was the plan the whole time. So like to take that money and invest further. And I had a little bit of other money from other things I'd done getting to that point. So I had some money set aside. And so basically after selling that, I sat on it for like a year, just waiting for a right opportunity. I like was looking at the market, waiting for something to pop up, was building connections with people, like like a debt lender, people that were buying and selling real estate in the area. And I ended up getting connected with a guy who owned a property. It was a little fourplex, and he said he wanted to sell it. I was like, hey, I'm looking to buy. And next thing you know, we were buying it. So I was living with Aiden at the time, and I kind of mentioned that, like,
in Austin, right?
Yeah. So I'd kind of mentioned, I'm like looking to buy this property. He's like, oh, I've thought about some like doing real estate, and I personally like having partners for a couple reasons. And so I was like,
I hate having partners, bro.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry.
No,
I personally like having
Yeah.
partners, especially in real estate, because it's such a capital-intensive business that, say I have like $100,000 to invest, right? I can basically buy like $500,000 worth of assets with that. If I have $100,000 and I go 50-50 with someone, now we have $1 million of assets worth that we can buy if we're using 20% leverage, which basically means we can have some scale in our portfolio, so we can buy more units, which gives us margin of safety. If something goes wrong in one property, if we have a couple other properties, we can like cover some of those costs a lot better than we could if it was just that one property and we had like say a vacancy for 3 months. Like we have no revenue or income coming in. So having some diversification of our assets, since we're like investing together, we can multiply that. So that's like one of the main reasons. The other is just in terms of actually doing like work on the properties, having a property manager. The more properties you have, the cheaper it's going to be. And so you kind of get this with scale, you kind of can gain some operational efficiencies that are better. That's why one of the reasons why I like having partners. Also, it's just nice like talking through decisions with someone else.
Yeah.
It's not like solely on you to make the decision. And like in the past, every real estate like deal I've done, and I've done it with a partner, I've been the more like real estate specific focused person, and they've been like more of the capital. But it's still nice to have someone else to like talk through those decisions with you.
I would just want to ask one more question. What do you think about going into deals with like maybe your friends? Because I know they talk about a lot of in business, right? There is this debate of whether or not it's a good or bad idea to start a business with a friend. Because what if it goes south, things could go bad, and then what if you ruin the friendship, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of them that have been success stories as well. It's like so far with like you and Aiden. But what do you think, or like what are some principles that come into your head when it comes to that inner dialogue of like, should I go into like a deal with my friend?
I'd rather go in with a friend than with a stranger personally, because had that time of being a friend to prior vet them as a person, so I know that like they're a good person. They're not going to try and screw me or something. Because if it's just some rando off the street, like the likelihood of them being a person that is going to screw you is much higher, just statistically, because I haven't taken the time to learn if I trust them or not.
Yeah.
Right. So that's number one. Number two, there will always be conflict within a partnership because, you know, people aren't aligned on everything. And that's, like I said, that's a good thing because you have difference of opinions in terms of making decisions. So we had one decision that we were trying to make when it came to the first property with my partner at the time. And I felt very strongly about one way and he felt very strongly about the other way. And so coming to a conclusion about making that decision, it was like down to like 10 to 15 grand of like if we do it or not. And I said we should do it. He said we shouldn't do it. And it was a conflict. And going through that conflict and making that decision as friends was much easier than it would be with a strict business partner, because like our friendship was more important than like some 10 grand decision, right? So like it makes the decision easier at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think one thing we've also noticed is like you kind of know your friend's strengths and weaknesses to begin with, and it kind of helps to like specialize what each person is going to do.
It's also easier to treat them outside of that role too. As well.
But one thing I want to touch on is, so you've mentioned, right, that you've made some money outside of regular employment, right? Not doing 9-to-5 jobs, whatever it might be, like the traditional way of making money. But you mentioned, we were listening to another podcast that you had, and you mentioned like the importance of having your own money and how important it is to you to be able to have the money that you make yourself to be able to spend on whatever you need, or like when you're older, financially afford medical things or nursing home or whatever it might be. So can you talk a little bit about like when you realized like that was really important to you and you needed to kind of do more with your money than just the traditional job?
That's a good question. It's hard to put a finger on the exact time when like it wasn't like a light bulb moment for me.
Right.
It was something that like just came about over time. My dad was always very particular about teaching me like the power of compounding. He never took the step farther to be like, okay, how do you actually do that? He always he had this Excel sheet that he would show me. He's like, well, if you have 1,000 now and over 20 years at 8%, you'd have this much. If you have at 10 years, you only have this
Those
much.
retirement calculators.
And I was like, cool, man, that sounds awesome. But like, and that was that, right? So I like had this in the back of my mind kind of, but I never knew what to do with that. Like I didn't know you could just like, and back when I was in high school, you couldn't just like open a Robinhood account and like throw some money in and like, oh, I'm investing. So it wasn't accessible to me. So I kind of understood that. And then my dad also talked about like, you know, the delayed gratification with like working on a house for free for a whole summer and like making like $3 an hour. Like those skills that he gave me then at that time, like definitely are still prevalent in my life today. But it wasn't like the application of that didn't come till later. And so I read like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read some other books, and like that one summer where I was working on the house, I worked on it alone because my buddy had like to work for his stepdad the whole summer. So I was just like literally at a house alone all summer working on it. And so I just spent all the time like listening to audiobooks, and that kind of shaped like my beginning into, I guess personal finance. I took a personal finance course in the Army that was like through Dave Ramsey, if you know who that is. I have a lot of mixed opinions on that, but it was definitely a start for me. And so it's just like those things constantly like growing and building those ideas surrounding it, I think heads up over time.
Yeah. Well, we were gonna talk a little bit about financial instruments, which ones you use and why you use them. But I think to contextualize that, because they're all going to be whether or not you use them.
Yeah.
Right. And really understand that, I think it's best for us to go over where you want to be, because the decisions you make and what investments you choose are off of where you want to be. Right. So I guess, what is your financial North Star, and where do you want to be at the end of the day? Do you want to live kind of just mortgage, just have like house in the suburbs, whatever it may be, or do you want to generate a lot more money? And also, why would you want it to generate more money?
Yeah, I think North Star wise, I think of it a little bit more broken down to like more short-term goals. I don't know where I want to be when I'm 60. Like having $100 million versus having $5 million really doesn't register for me in terms of knowing the difference between those two. Like I understand like logically what the difference is, but like I don't know what I'm going to want when I'm 60, right? What I do know is like in all likelihood a couple extra zeros in the bank, like it's not going to matter that much. because money's just a tool and it should be looked at that way instead of like the holy grail of like what actually matters. So it's all just a tool to get to what you actually want. But like I said, I think of it more in short-term chunks. So like right now, the most important focus is like financial freedom, which basically is like you were saying earlier, just not having to depend on anyone else for anything, whether that's a boss, anything, right? So like, I don't want to have to work a job I hate for someone I hate because I need the paycheck. I don't want, like, say I have a mortgage due. I have, I have to eat. I have to provide for my family in some capacity. I don't want to have to depend on someone else for that. And I want to have the optionality to do whatever I need to do. So that's the first step. The second step goes a little bit past like the technical freedom of just like having the ability to do what I want to do. It's actually having the ability to do like the actual things I want to do. So that might be traveling around the world. That might be like buying the nice car I want to buy. That might be investing into certain locations that I think could use the investment. For example, like in the nonprofit that my dad and I run. So like having the optionality and freedom to actually invest and do the things that I want to do, that's like the next step. After that, like, it doesn't make sense realistically to like sit on a beach for the rest of your life and just like do nothing. Yeah. That's just not very fulfilling in my opinion. I want to have the option to do that if I do so choose, but in all likelihood, the more likely option that's going to happen is that I keep working. And at that point, it's not because, I need the extra $100,000 or whatever that I'm working for that year. Not that I need to do the extra deal. It's because I want to do it. And because it's like the love of the game to do it. Yeah. It's just having the optionality to do that, right? And so I think that's a much more fulfilling way to live. And also, I mean, we could go on for hours about why I think it's like morally important that you actually take care of yourself,
right?
As your own sovereign individual and like not. But that's besides the point. I could go on for hours about that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are a lot of good points. I think just the option to do whatever you want is very powerful at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's something that I like. What was I watching? I think it was like an Instagram reel this morning, and it was like this. It was like the same thing. It was like bosses or like companies use your salary as like leverage to keep you to do something that you hate. And I was like, that kind of lines up with what you said, because I mean, a lot of people hate their jobs, but they're only there because they think it's the only way that they're going to be able to live their day-to-day lives and pay like the next bill or put food on the table. But
and it's not even just that, like, right? Like, I'm not sovereign anymore once I have to listen to XYZ person, right? Yeah. It's not even that just that I have to be there 9 to 5, right? Like, yeah, I can't be wherever I want to be, do what I want. Like, if my kid has some baseball game and I have to work, like, I can't go. That's one thing. But also, I can't say whatever I want to say, right?
Right.
Because, like, I could be fired like that. And that's just, like, not the place where I want to be, where I have to depend on someone else saying what I can and can't do. I want to have, like, be a sovereign person that I can do whatever it is I want to do. And, like, if I say something that, like, tomorrow, right now it's okay for me to say, but tomorrow it's not okay for me to say, and I still said it because I truly believe that, now I lost my job and, like, can't provide for my family. I just don't want to live in, like, that type of way if I don't have to.
Yeah, that's like one of my biggest motivators too. I just want to be able to think freely, and I think it kind of takes me back a little short story. I worked at like Mariotto's for like a full summer a couple years ago, and I felt myself like slowly drifting into that. And I went back the next summer, and when I was having those same conversations with my boss, because I kind of knew of other stuff I could do. I had other jobs that were lined up, and when they would like yell at me or like say whatever they want to me, it just didn't hit the same. Like, it didn't hurt me anymore, because I'm like, I could go do something else. Like, I'm not taking this personal anymore. And being able to have that option to just feel like not feel as personally attacked also was like something that I appreciated from a little bit more financial just freedom and options as well.
100%.
But so, okay, talk about where you are, how you got there, where you want to go, right? So I think it's only appropriate to talk a little bit how you think you're going to get there. So we're going to go through some financial instruments that we're going to touch on a little bit: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all lined up. But I guess we'll start with stocks, day trading. What are your thoughts on that way of making money? Whether it's long-term holds, whether it's swing trades, whatever it may be.
I personally detest buying single stocks.
Also, I'll preface this. This is all in his opinion.
Yeah, this is my opinion.
This
Not
is
financial advice for anyone else listening, but I personally very dislike buying personal stocks. I buy like baskets of stocks so that I can have that diversification because I have zero control over whether Apple does well this quarter or Google does well this quarter. And even just on a time adjusted basis, it just doesn't make sense for me to spend my time valuing stocks when I can just buy all of them.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Statistically, you're not going to be better. Even if you did spend hours and hours analyzing these stocks and looking at all the different patterns or whatever, buying and selling at just the right times. If you have a portfolio that's under $100,000, even if you did beat the market by like a decent margin each year, say 1% or 2%, the amount of time you have to spend to do that doesn't translate to a dollar amount per hour that's actually worth your time. And so it just doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to trade single stocks unless you're some genius that I am 100% not. Warren Buffett, is a very trite thing that people talk about when they talk about this topic, is that Warren Buffett made a bet with the top 10 hedge funds, which employ the smartest people on earth, pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to sit in a room for 100 hours a week and trade stocks. These people won math competitions in China.
Me and him are cracking up
Went
when we
to
were
Yale, went to MIT, PhDs, absolute geniuses. Don't know how to talk to people because they're that smart.
Yeah.
They just are on a different level playing field as we are. That's who you're competing with. And they still didn't just beat clicking 2 buttons and buying the S&P 500. And so for that reason, everyone thinks they're smarter than everyone else, but you're not. You might be marginally, but that's not going to correlate to actually making a tangible difference in terms of your monetary dollars that you're making in the market. So in terms of stocks, I think it's ridiculous to buy single stocks. I just buy, the S&P 500. I buy emerging stock funds. I buy ETFs that are low cost, so they cost 1% or 0.01%, pennies on the dollar to invest in, and they don't trade, so I don't have to pay taxes on that. It's just the best option by far.
And then you just tap, put your phone down, and then don't worry about it.
You don't even have to. You can set it up so it does it automatically every month, and you literally never have to see it, and it just goes away. It's in there just making money.
Weren't you also wasn't there also a study that was done that people that made the most off their trading accounts, and it's the people that had almost forgotten the password to those accounts.
They did a basically a person that logged in X amount of times and the person that logged in the least amount of times made the most amount of money 100% of the time. So just buying and forgetting about it is a very viable strategy when it comes to buying stocks. You're not going to beat the market. You think, oh, it's overvalued now. You sell, and then the next year or the next 3 days, it goes up 70% and you lost. If you missed out on 18 trading days in the last 3 years or something, you'd miss out on over half the gains. And it's just if you just sold it just 1 day early, you lost 30% gains.
Yeah.
So it's COVID crashes the market, and you're oh, it's going to go down more. I got to take it out early. Take it out, and then it goes up 90%.
Yeah.
You missed out. So buying and selling and trading stocks, you're not a genius, so don't act like one.
In reality, I feel like most people who are buying and selling stocks anyways that are doing it, managing their own portfolio, have another job. They're probably just checking on their lunch break, and that's... You're not going
to beat the math wizards.
You're not going to beat
the dude that's staring at a screen for 100 hours a week. Yeah, you're not going to win. Yeah. They're up at the crack of dawn looking at, you're not going to beat them.
Yeah. And also,
it's literally a player versus player game. You're strictly competing against them. They're stealing your money.
If you do make money off of stocks, most likely you would have still made money off of mutual funds, right? Just because the majority of time stocks go up is just when the market's going up, right? Is that true?
Yes and no. I don't like mutual funds personally.
Okay.
I wouldn't buy a mutual fund.
Oh, no, the difference I meant index funds.
Yeah, the difference between mutual fund and index fund is basically that a mutual fund is they have some manager that manages what they buy and sell, and an index just tracks a certain basket of stocks. And so the S&P 500 is the 500 biggest companies. Mutual fund is Bob whoever
yeah.
decides that we need to buy this and we need to sell that and buy this. And usually they have some criteria based on how much of their portfolio they have allocated to what and what and what. The problem with that is you're paying them like 1 to 3%, which like over a long term, like even if they beat the market by 1% each year, you're still losing 2% because you're paying them 3%. It's like if you're making 9% and the market makes 8%, you're actually taking home 7%.
Mm-hmm. So
you're actually making worse off even if you beat the market every single year, which doesn't happen. And secondly, since you're trading, buying and selling, you have tax liabilities for that. And so if you have a 30% tax liability on your active income, if they sell it in closer than a year, say you have paid 30% on your taxes, that's a 30% loss over and over and over, and you lose out on all that compounding that you would get when tax-free. So it's just not a good strategy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. Mutual funds just it just doesn't make much logical sense. But, I mean, as you're talking about index and ETFs, is that where the majority of it makes sense at this age?
Okay, so I'll backstep and give you like an overview of my portfolio just so it makes sense for someone listening. I have about 50% of my money of my liquid money in stocks. And then I have about 50% of it in real estate, in equity in real estate. And then I have, that's like my liquid. And then I have money set aside for my 401k, IRA, tax advantage money. And that's like just enough money to make the money I need to retire comfortably, which is important to do the math for. And then I have like some allocation towards cash for like the next deal that comes up, basically. So the stock portfolio is basically like my longer term cash balance that I want to use to invest into real estate. So my goal scenario is to have like all of that into real estate eventually, and then like most of my stocks being in retirement accounts. And I still think it's important to have some allocation to the stock market, not just real estate. So I will keep some there. And then anything in cash I hold in like money market funds, which make like a little bit less than treasuries, basically. Okay. So that's how I have my strategy set up.
I feel like it almost parallels. There's this one piece of advice. I think it was also like iced coffee hour, like Graham, Steph, and somebody else. But they were talking about a rule, or maybe it was Dave, I don't remember. But they were talking about your investment portfolio. This is just one perspective on it. Should reflect where your intelligence is. So if you're somebody that has like the majority of your knowledge is in real estate, the majority of your investment should also be in real estate. And that was just one perspective to it. And obviously there's a ton of ways you could qualify that because, for obvious reasons. But how true do you think that statement is, or how much do you apply that to your portfolio?
I think there's definitely some truth to that. I think it is important to have, number one, diversification. Number two, managing your risk is also extremely important. And then number three is, you want to chase higher yields while you're managing that risk, right? So like I believe very, very strongly that in private markets, you can have greatly higher returns than you could in public markets. Every single person that's listening to this right now can, in 5 minutes, invest in any stock they want to invest into. You can download Robinhood app, connect your bank account, and throw however much money you want into any stock, right? And all the information that's that stock, the money that stock, the cost of it is based off of the information that's given to everyone, the same amount, because it's not allowed to insider trade. If you do, you go to jail, unless you're in Congress, I guess. Whereas in private markets, the information that everyone has is not the same. And if I have more information than you do, I can make more informed decisions than you can, and it's not illegal. You're allowed to insider trade. If I have a buddy that owns a company that's going to sell it, they don't have to go post it on everywhere. I can buy it just like that. So it's like legal insider trading. So number one, you can make more money like that. And then there's just opportunities in private markets that can never be found in public markets without taking insane amounts of risk. So I can make, for example, I'll give you an example of a buddy of mine that bought a business for basically 1x EBITDA. Grew it in 20% in the first year. Second year, planned to grow another 40%. That's in the first year, 120% return. Literally impossible to get in public markets, because everyone has the same information, and the only way you will get that is by taking either, number one, insane amounts of leverage, or number two, you just get extremely lucky. And the likelihood of you getting extremely lucky with enough money to make it actually worthwhile, controlling your risk, it's not going to make a big difference. Because like if it's, I mean, no single stock should be greater than like 5 to 10% of your portfolio. Say 5% of your portfolio, it's 100% return. But if it's like you're investing in your own business, like you can put a lot more than 5% and still be safe because you have control over that investment. So private markets are like a much, much better place to have your money. The only problem with that is deal flow. Like I have a couple ways to solve deal flow personally. But I don't remember how we were talking about that.
Well, actually, can we go down that a little bit? Deal flow. So, well, what exactly is deal flow? I mean, I feel like I could intuitively, but
so for that example, basically, in a public market, deal flow for everyone is the exact same, right? Because I can look on my screen at any brokerage account and see all the same stocks that you can buy, right? So we all have the same deal flow. So for that reason, we all have the same opportunities to buy and sell different stocks, right? I mean, there's some complex financial instruments that like are only available to certain people. Like for example, like taking extra leverage, margin, maybe short selling. Those are different things, but like in all reality, our deal flow is the exact same. Private markets, if I have built myself as a person in a certain market that buys, say I'm someone that buys dental practices and I roll up dental practices, so I keep buying dental practices. The more I buy dental practices, the more people are going to know me as the person that buys dental practices. And so the likelihood of me getting a deal from someone that is selling a dental practice is much higher than like some rando off the street that decides one day they want to buy a dental practice. So that'd be my deal flow. So my deal flow would be higher than someone else. And because of that, I have a better opportunity for finding good deals because I have more deals I can look at, right? So if it's a real estate market, if I'm going to buy a house just off the multiple listing service, which everyone has access to, my deal flow is the same as everyone else. If I'm getting a property from someone that I know personally is going to sell me off market, that's added deal flow to my strategy. And so deal flow is a very important piece of the puzzle when it comes to private investing because those opportunities that are actually home runs are like needle in a haystack. So you have to look through a lot of deals in order to find the right one.
Has that been something that like you've been able to take advantage of yet in your real estate portfolio?
In some capacity, yeah. Like I said, the first property I bought with Aiden was an off-market deal. So that is a little bit more, I guess you would consider it increase from my deal flow, maybe.
Yeah. Yes.
But I'm kind of building a community of people that work in financial instruments and invest and are operators. And that's kind of my way of solving deal flow to some extent. You guys heard of the Patel cartel? I'm going to burst the story, but like the basic premise is that a guy with the last name Patel came over to the U.S., bought a motel, got it running. Like he could run it cheaper than like his competitor could because he lived at the property. His kids like helped him do the work and stuff. So he like got it running, ran well. Sent some money back to his cousin. His cousin came and bought another motel. And they both pooled their money, sent it to another cousin. And then years and years later, they own like billions and billions of dollars worth of motels. The Patel people do. People with the last name Patel. And now they own like over 50% of all the motels in the U.S.
Damn.
And that just goes to show that like they've gotten their deal flows set up correctly because number one, they have operators. Number two, they have a way they can run it in a more efficient manner than the next person can. So they can pay a higher price to get the same return, which means they can outbid other people and get more motels. And then they have scale. And they have, a group of people that are doing it together. And so I'm kind of building something comparable to that with a community I like to call Gelt. So there's like 15 of us now. We're going to like 25 in January. And that's just basically a group of people that are highly ambitious and also believe that financial wealth is a large piece of success and care about that. And so we're kind of building like a little bit of a deal flow based group that can add to like, say there's 50 people in there. All of them find one good deal a year in a private market. That's 50 deals you can choose from any given year. And so that kind of solves their problem because you're vetting the person instead of vetting the actual investment itself. Because if I spend 5 years knowing your investment strategy and I know that you're a great operator, you go to buy a business, I know that I can trust you to run that business well. Like my friend that bought that one business, if he'd asked me for money, I'd give it to him in a heartbeat. Right? So like...
Yeah, I want to talk about this like a little bit more and just deal flow and how you could establish. I mean, is also a part of that leverage as well. Is like kind of another way of putting it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like the more leverage you have stacked, the more that these deals are going to come to you. So I know that you're talking about it with the community that you're building for you, but what are some ways someone in college can build or improve their deal flow and become more aware of these things? And part of it could be community, right? But what are some things that come to your head?
I'd say for the average person in college, you're probably not going to have a meaningful sum of money to invest into private markets. And usually one of the barriers to entry in a private market compared to a public market is you can't buy like fractional pieces usually. So like I couldn't go in with a buddy and put like a grand into a real estate deal because like the amount of forms and tax liabilities and all different things you have to fill out and make, it's not going to be worth the 1K, right? So like having 100 people buy $1,000 of property is like not worth it, right? So you're probably not going to have a meaningful sum of money in order for it like to cut the check, right? I mean, if you're investing with real estate private equity, like the minimum amount of money you put in is like 50 grand. Like most people in college just don't have that type of money, right? So when it comes to deal flow, like, do you even need deal flow at that point? Mm-hmm. Maybe not. But like, if you have a long-term view of like, okay, I want to do dental practice roll-ups. I keep bringing that up. If you want to do, HVAC, you want to buy business in HVAC systems or plumbing or, lawn care, whatever it is, right? Say you decide this is what I want to do. Maybe I want to do real estate. The best thing you can possibly do is number one, become a thought leader in that industry. So like learn as much as you can about that so that when it comes time to invest, you'll like, number one, know what you're doing and not lose all your money. Number two, you'll have people that like can trust you because they know that like, oh, you're the real estate guy. Like you talk about real estate all the time. Like
yeah, you have a real estate newsletter.
I'd probably trust you when it comes to like my money in real estate because I know you're like a real estate guy or whatever it is, right? So that's number one. Number two is like knowing people that are also going to be like kind of like building your own community, right? So like whether that's people in college that like in the next 3 to 5, 7 years maybe after graduation will be in places to either number one, invest with you, number two, give you opportunities, number three, go through deals, be partners, whatever it is. Building that like I don't want to call it network, but like group of friends probably that you can invest with, pool your money with, whatever it is. That's important as well if that's what you want to do. Those are probably like the most important things I think for deal flow wise, just because I mean in college like the likelihood of you being like a large investor in private markets is like pretty low.
Yeah.
Short answer is people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of set your community up for after when you actually have the money.
Yeah, and like me, don't be stupid. If you have opportunities, take them. If it's good, like if you can, you have this investment criteria set up, or you're like, I will buy this. Just do it. Like, don't be afraid of doing it. And
this is the time to take the risk, right?
Exactly. So if I look back now, I'm kicking myself for all those opportunities I had that I didn't take. Man, like, where might life be now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so a lot farther ahead than I am now. Not that like I'm upset with that, but it's just knowledge. Like put that in the back of my mind and realize, okay, going forward, if something makes sense and it's within my buy criteria, I'm gonna buy it. And if I can't buy it with the money I have, I'll find a way to buy it. Right. So there was ways I could have done the things. I was just honestly, I was like, I'm in college. Like I already got this property.
I got a 411 exam tomorrow.
I got all these things going on. Like
I
don't want to be doing. I don't know if I can handle that. I definitely could have handled it. Like it was just me being like a little bit cowardly when it comes to that, and that was just like a learning experience for me. So
talking about risk and opportunity, we'll come back to the whole like financial instruments we were talking about. I always hear like about like investing and like investing your money, like when you're young is the time to take the risk. Like once you're like past 50, like you can't afford to take risky investments. So like where are you about like the lower risk securities like CDs and bonds?
So for me, I'm like a very risk on investor, except when it comes to my long-term portfolio. So I kind of have two different portfolios. The long-term portfolio is like the money I need to retire comfortably. Like we said earlier, I think it's like morally reprehensible for you to like not take care of yourself and place that job on someone else, probably your kids. They don't want to take care of some old dude that's like can't change himself, like gotta have diapers. I'm like, no one's to do that, right? And I don't want to place that financial burden on my kids or anyone else for that matter. So doing the math and saying, all right, they did a bunch of financial simulations basically to say that like you'll basically never fail if you take 4% of your liquid portfolio a year. So if you say you have $1 million, you can live off $40,000 a year. So you do the math and you say, okay, how much money will I need to live off of when I'm 60, when I'm retired? Say it's $100,000, say it's $200,000, say it's $300,000, whatever it is. So you just do the math and you say, okay, how much money do I need when I'm retired in order to make that? What if it's $100,000? That means I need $2.5 million
I see.
invested
that's
in the stock market, so I can take 4%, which equals,
Yeah, I see.
The basic premise is if I make 8% a year, give or take, right? So over the long term, making 8%. Some years will be more, some years will be less. If you always take 4% of your portfolio, you'll basically never cut into the actual portfolio itself. You'll only be living off the gains of the portfolio. And some years will go up and down, right? So some years you'll have like a loss and you'll still be taking 4%. Some years you have a gain, 4%. So in the long term, it evens out, right? So with that being said, that amount of money I need when I retire is like my safe portfolio. And I basically do the math and say, all right, in an inflation adjusted stock market, you make 7-ish% a year, right? So if I make 8% a year to 10% a year, 8 to 10 with minus like a 3% inflation number gets to like 5 to 7, right? So a 5 to 7% return over now till I'm retirement age, which for me is probably like 65 maybe. Till I'm 65, I have to do the math to say how much money do I need to put aside each year in order at 5 to 7% return get that amount of money. So say it's $2.5 million, I need to put, I don't know, like $200, $300 a month away. All that money's going to in tax advantage accounts so that like Roth IRA, 401k, those financial instruments, which basically lower my tax burdens. So I'm not going to pay taxes on those gains. That way I know I'm covered. And like, if everything goes wrong, if I like, make some terrible financial decisions or whatever and like basically go broke, I at least have that covered and it's in safe, very well diversified funds so that I'm not worried about that. So that's like that part of the portfolio in terms of low risk. Everything else is like very, very risk on. So I don't like do like CDs. I don't do bonds.
Yeah.
I actually think like in the long term, 100% stocks is like always better than bonds. Except when you're like about to retire and like you have 100% stocks and then like a crash happens and then you're screwed, right? Yeah. That's terrible. That's so sad for those people. But so that's like my risk on portfolio, and that risk on portfolio is, stocks, real estate, private market. Like I'm investing like some money with a buddy this next year, stuff like that. Right? They're very risky investments, but the return on those investments is equal to the amount of risk I'm taking with those investments. Right? So like my real estate, I basically won't buy a property if it doesn't make me 20% a year in terms of IRR in a pro forma basis, right? Like obviously like that numbers might not always hit 20% every year, but like if it's not close to a 20% return, I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to go in stocks instead because of the higher risk that real estate offers. So I need to make a higher return for that. And like if I'm making 20% in real estate, like I'd want more money in real estate, but I just can't put all my money in real estate because like that's just not safe. Yeah. If the real estate market crashes, I'm gonna need some money in. Right, I'm gonna need some money in stocks to like balance that out. So you have to keep a diversification in front of your portfolio in terms of your portfolio. But as of right now, being 24, the risk I can take and like come back from is like very, very high. Yeah. So I have a huge risk tolerance, and like stomaching that might be hard sometimes, but knowing that in the long term I'll be better off that way. Taking leverage on my real estate properties, buying more in private markets, doing things that are quote unquote risky. As long as I can manage that over the long term, it'll be much, much better in terms of returns. If that makes sense.
That made a lot of sense. There's so much value. I'm actually really looking forward to re-listening to all this. But okay, so we stopped a little bit at retirement funds, IRAs, 401ks.
Yeah.
Talked a little bit about CDs, bonds, just kind of not the time. Probably never be the time for you. Talked about stock.
Someday. I'll be safe someday.
Maybe a little. Oh yeah.
When you're like 70 and just wanting to like grow.
Just give me my 4 or 5% return. Yeah. Stocks, touched on that, but how important is growing your credit at this age and bettering your credit at this age?
For me personally, or for people in general?
I guess both.
A little touch.
If yours is very different.
Little touch on just the average person, and then more importantly for you.
I'll say number one, like one of the bigger mistakes I made was not building my credit earlier. It's basically like a way for people to understand if they can trust you when it comes to money.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of people like kind of try to dunk on that and say like, oh, it doesn't actually matter. It kind of does. Like, it's important to like have a good credit, and it's really easy to do so. Like, literally just open a credit card and like put your Spotify on there and set it to auto pay, and then like 5 years from now you'll have a decent credit score.
Yeah, I mean, at least for
So
me,
it's super easy. It's like, if you're someone that's bad with money, and you should know this, like you should know, like, am I someone that can be responsible with money, or am I someone that needs to have tight constraints around my monetary spending? If you're someone that needs tight constraints, I understand, right? It's not for, like, not everyone's the best in any one area. I have things that I'm terrible at, and that's okay. But you have to know that about yourself so that you can put constraints around it so that you don't go off the rails and, like, end up in credit card debt, which is, like, the worst thing ever, because those 30% a year is terrible. It's almost sometimes impossible to get out of. So that being said, like, you need to be smart about using credit, especially if you're someone that knows that you aren't the best when it comes to, like, maybe you spend a lot of money, or you're just like, hey, I like that, I'm gonna buy it. That's okay. Like I said, it's okay.
I'll figure it out later.
Yeah. Some people are like that, and that's okay. But like using a debit card in that situation, if you buy it, you don't have the money for it, it won't let you buy it, and that saves you a lot of heartache that you could have had 2 months from now when you're like, did I really need that extra pair of shoes? Like, so when it comes to a credit card, I would say for most people, the best option to do is to get a credit card with a 0 annual fee. That's very important because you're going to have this forever because you never, ever want to cancel
It's very easy too. There's so many cards.
There's a bunch. The Discover It student card is the one I started with personally. I mean, they're all about the same, so it doesn't really matter for the first couple. So just buy it, put on your like Spotify, your Netflix, whatever. It's just one like very small
Gym payments, just
recurring something recurring, and then go through, make it auto pay from your bank account, and that way you're like, I was already gonna spend that $7 anyways. Yeah. So I'm not going to spend more money than I would on the credit card. I would highly suggest not to chase the big points thing, like, oh, I'm gonna get 90,000 points if I spend $4,000 the first year. That's definitely like has some validity to it. But credit card companies spend a lot of money on their like systems to try and they have very smart people that just basically their whole job is to get you to figure out how to get you to pay the most amount of money on your credit card, spend the most amount of money. So don't fall into that trap. If you already like, I spend this much a month and like first 6 months, I'm definitely going to spend $4,000. Then yeah, by all means, take the extra like 60,000 points or whatever they're going to give you. But like, don't just do that off the rip just to get the points. Like, don't chase
challenge.
Points. Yeah, don't chase points. Like, I have to spend.
I got this. I'll spend $5,000.
like guys, I'll pay for our meal. Everyone just Venmo me back because I need the extra points. Like, don't be doing that. Yeah. It's just like not a good financial strategy, I would say. That's what I think about credit. So credit is important. Yes, you should start early. I wish I'd started earlier, but do it in a very like low risk, very easy way. It takes like 5 minutes to get approved for a credit card. Get it sent. Just set it up. Put it in your drawer and forget about it. 10 years from now, 5 years from now, whenever it is that you're like, trying to get an apartment and you do run a credit check, buy a car, then you credit check. Whatever it is that needs a credit check, it's important to have one just so like people know they can trust you with your money.
Yeah, I sank in all that too. I got mine last year just because I was so bored because I was first semester business major that just had so much time on my hands.
What am I gonna do with my time? Apply for credit cards.
Yeah. No, like that was one of the first things I did. And it literally took like 5 minutes, and then you think it's gonna be this complicated process, but then you just get the card in the mail, and then it's super
buy
easy.
A packet gum a month, like just buy the bare minimum on it, and then in like 5-10 years from now, you're gonna have like a huge credit limit. They're gonna allow you to get like the higher perks, higher statuses. That's when it starts to make sense to actually look into the credit cards that actually can make more money. I mean, I don't buy anything with debit card now. Like I don't even carry a debit card. I only carry credit because it's just like it doesn't make sense to use debit in the long term. But if you're not smart with your money, definitely don't use a credit card.
Yeah.
Also helps you track your expenses too, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same as a debit card pretty much. Like you can do it through your bank account.
You could kind of isolate like, okay, I'm only going to spend entertainment on this card. And then that way it's kind of easier to see your subsects of expenses.
Yeah.
At that point.
No, I think Yeah, I got mine like 4 or 5 months ago. I haven't taken it out of my wallet like once. Like I have like a couple things on there. I heard the auto pay thing from someone else. So I have I think I have my Apple Music on there, and that's
something
like,
small.
And I'll like use it on like a meal every now and then.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Like I never use it.
Yeah, it's probably the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Just in the long term, you'll be happy you did it. It's like
Yeah.
such a simple thing that like over the long term is good for you.
Should someone have their money in checking or savings accounts at this age?
Once again, I would say it's not financial advice.
Yeah.
You said not in checking or savings accounts?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see a problem with it. What
Okay.
else would you do?
Well, the reason why I was questioning that, I was going to add a little bit more to it.
Yeah,
It
go
just-
ahead.
A lot of people, including myself, like for my early years of just having money, I would literally just leave it in my savings or checkings account.
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't going to use it. I was like, oh, like this is just going to be money to have. And well, at least for me, I do think that there's merit in having some of it in there. Like, I don't know, like $500 or whatever it may be, just in case something happens. There's definitely a good argument to put it in money market funds, or even just throwing it in the S&P where you are going to get, I mean, we talked about the S&P, but would you want to just touch a little bit on money market funds? Just a little brief explanation of what they are, because
So you're basically saying how you should allocate your cash.
a little bit, yes.
So number one, like definitely it's good to keep some cash in like a checking account or savings account just for like a rainy day,
Peace
right?
of mind,
Yeah.
too.
If something happens, like you want to be able to like
Yeah.
buy it, like fix the problem, right? So that's important, and it definitely gives you peace of mind. So for a lot of people, like that starts out with like, you know, the $1,000 in the checking account, whatever it is. That's probably going to cover like the majority of most small expenses. Then you're going to want like 3 to 6 months of cash, and that cash, like you mentioned, can be held in a money market fund. A money market fund is basically a high yield savings account. It's like the easy way to think about it. It'll give you a little bit less month than less APY than a treasury would. So
How
I think
liquid is it?
recently money markets have been at like the 4.5%. So per year you'll make like 5%, and those fluctuate. So it's not like I'm gonna get 5% and I leave it in there for
Yeah.
I'm gonna make 5%. No, it's like it's a rolling number that's based off of like the 10-year treasury, or it's like a couple bips below the 10-year treasury or whatever. Yeah, it's a bit.
And I laughed. I wouldn't know if it wasn't for Briggs.
It makes me feel smarter. Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
doing my best.
Briggs is like, this is the slang term for basis points.
So you'll make a little bit lower return than a 10-year treasury, but the treasuries, your money's locked up for a certain amount of time. Whereas a money market, it's like 24 hours. You can get your money out.
Okay, yeah, that was just the next question. How quickly could you liquidate?
Yeah, 24 hours basically overnight. You'd say one day I need it tomorrow, you can have it tomorrow, basically.
Okay.
So it's not like, it's pretty liquid, very, very liquid. Liquid enough for like anything that really comes up. So I hold pretty much like, I don't know, a couple grand in a checking account, just like peace of mind if I need to buy something, whatever happens. And then the rest, the cash, goes in a money market account or investments. If it's something that like, this is my investment money and like it's going to be a long-term investment, stocks, because it's give you higher return. But if it's a short-term money, don't put it in stocks, because you run into short-term investment risk, which like,
Exactly.
you know, if the market goes down 20% and you needed that money for like your school bills,
Yeah.
that's not good,
Yeah.
right? So now you're down. But in the long term, it'll be, in all likelihood, higher than it is today. You'll probably make returns. If you don't, then like we're all screwed and the
Yeah.
capitalism's ruined and like we're back. I don't know.
There's bigger problems.
to Stone
There's
Ages,
bigger
yeah.
problems
Yeah.
you got to worry about.
Right.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about investing in like different ways. One thing we want to talk about is like how your return on investment isn't always like a tangible amount. Like imagine getting a $5 coffee from Starbucks every single day. Like obviously you could put aside that $5 every day and then you'd have more savings, or you could get a greater potential gain from something that might come from going to Starbucks. And obviously those benefits aren't always monetary.
Yeah.
Like, here, you want to just give a quick little example?
Yeah, sure. So like imagine I go to Starbucks every day, get my $5 coffee, and one day I'm at Starbucks and someone sees me and like we're just waiting for our coffee and we start talking and like they want to invest in something that I'm working on, or like maybe they're at a position that I want to be in 10 years and they become like your mentor or something. Like that's obviously a gain that you wouldn't be able to get if you weren't at Starbucks that day. So like reflecting on that concept, have you ever like thought of a time where you may have like spent money on something that you could have set that money aside, but in the long run, it was like a good decision to spend that extra amount of money?
Yeah, definitely. I think I understand where people are coming from when they have the whole, $5 Starbucks coffee. I understand that because, yeah, it's $5 a day, $7 a day. It's getting to be over a year. That's like a couple grand, right? Like, yeah, if you add that up over 40 years and then you get 8% a year on that money, like it's going to add up to like a lot of money. But you could just take that forever and like I'm not going to spend money on anything. I'm not going to buy, the groceries I want to buy. I'm not going to do anything
I'm
because
live as a hermit.
Every dollar's worth $80 when I'm 60. So now it's like, oh, I'm spending $1 on this water right here. That's going to be like, $80. Like this is worth way more then. It's just a slippery slope of like what actually is the monetary value of $1 today versus $1 when I'm 60, right? So like, it's different for everybody. People have different opinions on that, and that's okay. And like the things that matter to each person is also going to be very different, right? So like if coffee is very, very important to me, I could, go get a $5 coffee, or I could spend like 30 hours on TikTok learning about the right way to make my cappuccino just perfect, and like spend $2,000 on the right equipment. Like it's like the three things I think that people don't take into account when it comes, or don't spend the right amount of money on, in my opinion, is like you said, maybe the networking opportunities, relationship building opportunities. If you're putting yourself in a position to build a relationship with someone and you're looking at it from a financial like dollar amount that could be worth, say I'm going to go to a dinner and there's going to be people there that I want to meet and it's going to cost me money, so I'm going to stay home.
Yeah. I
don't know. So that's one thing that I think like maybe you should focus a little more on. Next is like probably quality of life. Like you just have to take into account, like the way I look at it is, if the best thing to do, in my opinion, when it comes to spending money is take the things that matter a ton to you and spend more and more money on those. Take all the things that don't matter that much to you and spend as little money on those, versus most people are like somewhere in the middle on all those things, right? They spend like a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there. They might be spending the same amount of money as the person that spends all their money on the one thing they really care about and not a lot of money on the things they don't care about. They might be spending the same amount of money, but their quality of life is going to be much lower, right? So like finding the things that actually matter to you, like say coffee is something that's really important to me. Spending more money on coffee, and like my shoes don't really matter that much. I'll just buy like a basic pair of shoes and not spend like a bunch of money on like the newest Air Jordans or whatever. If this is vice versa and I don't care about coffee, then like, yeah, I shouldn't be going to Starbucks every day and buying a coffee. I should just make it at home. And I should be spending my money on Air Jordans because my quality of life is going to be like that much higher. I had a third thing. But
I'll just say one little quick thing on that is, I don't know, my grandpa said this to me once. Usually he's like a big like one-liner guy and puns.
Yeah.
But he told me once, you don't want to be the richest man in the graveyard. And that kind of, it was just like that one thing. I know I tweeted it. Aiden liked it. I'm like, oh, Aiden liked it. But I'm like, that's when you know it's good,
Yeah.
If Aiden Murphy likes
100%.
But that kind of hit me too, because I was like working a lot. And it was like just 24/7 and not spending a dime. And
there's a time and a place for everything, right?
Yeah, like
100%.
I think the majority, I don't spend much, like, besides Chipotle, I don't spend really
He really
any
cares about Chipotle. That's good. Spend more money on Chipotle.
Yeah.
You should go to Chipotle more, I think.
Amen. I don't really spend much on like going out or like going out to eat, but I dump a ton of money into like trips.
Yeah.
Which will be like tomorrow, like me and my friends are going to the Bears game.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a core memory for me, and I could see that in the future. And those experiences, I can justify dumping a ton of money into that. But like some new like Versace,
having clarity about the things that actually matter to you, and then like spending your money. I mean, money's a tool, right? Like I said earlier, it's not like the end all be all. It's not like having an extra dollar in the bank account is gonna make you feel better about yourself. Like it just doesn't. You might think it might, but it doesn't. Like after a certain point, like it's just a tool, and like an extra zero or like whatever doesn't matter. And like if I'm just buying, the newest car so that I look better to the guy across the street, but I don't really actually care about the car, then like what am I doing? It just doesn't make sense. And so having clarity about the things that actually matter to you and then spending money on those things is the right idea. To go back to your original question of like things that I've specifically spent money on that like at the time may have seemed like not the greatest financial decision, but turned out to be an amazing financial decision. I'd say one of the main ones was any type of personal development, anything I feel like I've spent on money on personal development has never really been wasted. I mean, there's definitely been things I bought that like I didn't really get as much value as I thought I was going to get out of them, but it was still a good investment just in the fact of like I'm investing myself psychologically. I'm putting resources into my own knowledge, my own learning, my own abilities, and that's the one of the biggest examples of this was I spent probably a year and a half considering buying this course. It was $600 at the time, and I was just like, this is like more money than I've spent on anything.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, am I really gonna make it worth it? Is it really gonna be 100%? I would have paid $3,000 for that course. I would have paid, now I'd probably pay like $510. Not that the course is that good, but it's just that like even the smaller, it was around charisma, right? So like it was about being a more charismatic person.
I was gonna actually bring that up,
Yeah.
like with before you even.
So literally, if I was 1% better at charisma and had a conversation with one person that liked me better than they would have otherwise and gave me a job, boom, 10 grand right there, because I'm making 10 grand more at that job than I would somewhere else. Return on investment, 100%.
Yeah.
And over the long term, it's like those skills that you gain, you'll have with you forever, and no one can take that from you. And so every day you use that, even if you're like 0.5% better, 1% better at that. If I'm 1% better at telling a story and it gets people 1% more captivated, you know, when it comes to selling something, I'm going to be 1% better.
one more
Every
sale,
day,
one more sale. Yeah.
every day for the next, 40 years, that's a huge return, right? And it might not seem like, okay, that wasn't worth $600 because like maybe I just learned one little thing. You're right. Like when you look at something in a vacuum of like financially, it might not make sense. But if you have to look at something totality, which is super hard because a lot of those things aren't tangible, actual dollar amounts you can put to something and say, yeah, this is a great investment. Me buying Chipotle isn't maybe a great investment, but like, if I saved 20 minutes and I like had to go to a meeting and I wasn't late and like it made a good impression, you can look at it any way you want. You could say like, the other thing is health. I mean, health is like a huge thing that's like very, very important to invest into. Like, if you have a better bed that you can actually sleep well in, you sleep in it every night, you're more rejuvenated. First of all, you have a higher quality of life. Second of all, you're going to be more energetic and like chasing whatever the deal is or something, that's going to be better for you in the long term. Being like fit, spending more money on a gym membership, whatever it is. Actually having a gym membership, going to the gym, maybe wearing clothes that make you feel good when you're there so that you are more likely to go there. Those things really add up because in the long term, your ability to like continue pushing through, continue working, getting out of bed, playing with your kids, it's going to yield huge dividends. And while it might not always be specifically monetarily, even just in the quality of life, that's important. And it's like kind of the cost of doing business. So it's important.
It's funny how everything kind of gets distilled down so much that at least how the phases that I went through that I've talked with Austin and Casper about are at the beginning, like before like going to college. I just was going to college because everybody else was, right?
Yeah.
And then my first semester, I spent all of it like, why am I here? Like, what am I gaining out of this, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm thinking about what the price tag is and everything. I'm like, there's just no way that it's worth it. I'm gonna go like make money in other ways. And then as first semester like progressed, and also I think that's when I started to realize this, as well as over the summer and the beginning of last semester, it's actually, if you really make it worth it, it's so worth the price tag. If you, obviously there's so many other variables, right? But if you can afford it, it makes so much sense just for those people that you meet. And I think the maturation to see everything a lot more holistically and like, okay, $4 coffee, but I really like coffee. I really hate it at home. And like, what if I really like the people I see there? There's that one person I really like having them in my life. And if I don't go, who knows if I'm going to see them anymore. When you really start to like holistically understand everything, it's interesting how you always feel like you know everything and then you really don't, right?
And there's always nuances to everything, right?
Exactly.
Like, this is not me saying spend more money on stuff. Like, that's ridiculous. And it's also super easy to justify yourself. Like, I like that, so I should just buy it.
Yeah.
It's also not the right way to look at it, right? So like you have to know, am I the person that's going to tend towards spending more money on stuff, or am I the person that's going to spend like err towards being a tightwad? And then you should probably get somewhere in the middle of those two, right? Like you shouldn't just be spending all your money willy-nilly. If you care about your financial future in any capacity, you also shouldn't like be a slave to money, because then all the work you're putting in is for naught. And so what's the point? And so the long-term viability of your actual, happiness and drive to continue working is not going to be there. And so if you become a slave to money, like if you use that money as a tool to get the things that you actually want and enjoy your life with that, then you're probably going to be more motivated in the long term to keep showing up every day at work, whether it's, in your own business, if it's you're investing, if you're working at a company, whatever it is that you're doing, you're probably going to have the more longer term drive and motivation if you're actually using your money as a tool. So coming in between those two extremes of like just spending your money willy-nilly and like not spending your money at all, and finding the places where you're actually best off spending that money. For me, it's like, health, personal development, and then like quality of life. Like those three things are like a good place for me to spend my money personally. So if I spend my money on that, I'm going to have more. I'm actually enjoy working because like, I like having money because I can use it for these specific things, and it makes my life better.
Yeah, it's important to find your balance of like where am I spending my money to get obviously monetary gains, but then also like the gains that actually make your quality of life better.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think we've talked about a lot of things, right? When how Jacob made his money, why money's important, the different ways of investing, and how you kind of use those in your life. And then obviously we ended on like more of a note of how money can help you in other aspects of your life. But anything else you want to add in like the whole grand scheme of what we've talked about today?
First of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Second time, I'm honored.
Of
I thought I
course.
blew it the first time, so thanks for having me the second time. It feels good. Maybe I was not so bad the first time. That's good. Secondly, if someone made it this far on the episode, like props, because I said
We're going.
spewed a lot of stuff. It's been a while. How long are we running for? A minute?
Hour 21.
A minute?
An hour and 21 minutes, exactly. Yeah. So 80 minutes, that's a long time to listen to my voice. So you're a trooper, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, I just say, I think the last thing I want to leave someone with is people can find themselves on the spectrum of being extremely stressed about money and like not caring at all about money. And I think there's different times in life when you should, in my opinion, be farther towards one way than the other. But if you're in college and you're at least thinking about these things, you're much farther ahead than 90% of the world. Like if you're at, a 4-year university, which most of your listeners probably are, right? You're doing well for yourself, and like definitely make the most of that, because it is a big investment. And like in any investment, like we talked about earlier, like there's things you can spend your money on. Like you can go to Starbucks and like maybe meet someone that will potentially invest in you. I mean, if you didn't meet the person, then like you might have had the $7 coffee and like you didn't actually get the thing that you went there to get. So you got to like make the most out of each investment, whether it's like college or not. But I will say I spend a lot of time stressed about like, I need to make this much money. I need to do this. I need to do this next thing. And like, just in all reality, like you're ahead of 99% of the world if you're able to attend a 4-year university, if you're going to get a job that's making like 50, 60 grand a year after college, if not more. Some people make a lot of money after college. And so if you're thinking about this stuff now, you're way ahead of everyone. I would say just put into practice the smallest thing you can, whether that's like, investing $5 a month, $500 a month, just understanding like, okay, while I'm in college, the most important thing is learning. So if you can at least like apply the smallest thing, have the smallest portfolio, maybe you trade single stocks now just to understand like what it's like to do those things. Just putting into practice the smallest thing. When you do start getting a big paycheck, say you're making $2, $3, $4, $5 grand a paycheck, now I've actually like understood tactically how to do those things. So I'm not learning it all when the stakes are high. When the stakes are low in college and you're like putting $500 away like every couple months, maybe it's just like a market tuition. You're just learning the market in public markets, whatever it is. And then like you're starting to build out your strategy, understand yourself, how comfortable I am with risk, how much risk I want to take, all those different types of things. So just doing the smallest thing now will set yourself ahead, miles ahead of the other people, but also just understand that like you're already ahead, you're already doing great, and like it doesn't really matter that much. Just like at least care about it a little bit and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a 100 millionaire to be successful. Like,
and success
maybe
is
you want to be,
relative,
maybe you want to be, right? But like that's not saying that's not a bad goal. It's definitely like maybe I have goals like that, but like it's still understand that like if you're providing for yourself and you're like caring about retirement at least a little bit, then they're like you're good.
Yeah, that's.
You might want to be great, but like good's the step to get there.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Yeah, that's something that's also been on the forefront of my head as well. Is like the average American is in debt, so the fact that we're at this age and we can see far enough into the future that we don't even have, the majority of us don't really have many bills to pay.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can have a conversation like this of where to get ahead is something we should be grateful for in and of itself. So yeah, thank you for coming on again. Like we really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
There was like so much value here too.
Dude,
like,
I mean, I'm not a finance major, so I mean, I get a lot from it. So.
There we go.
But even still, like,
Yeah,
you understand
This
the what.
definitely won't replace a finance degree, I'll tell you that.
We were talking about that the other day. And so I took an investing class in high school. We can cut this out if we want, but
Yeah.
I took an investing class like sophomore year of high school, and I was like telling him like when we were like making this doc, and I was like telling him some of the stuff. I was like, yeah, I know what this is, I know what that is. Like, Roth is the one that doesn't get taxed when you pull it out and all that. And he was like, honestly, you probably know like what number did you say? I don't want to like mess it up, but
At least the way that I went. Okay. Well, everybody's different in how much value because it's relative to how much value you extract from your degree, right? You could go through all your classes, kind of just do whatever on them and like just go for the grades and not really worry about the material. And you could pretty much walk away with very minimal,
Basically zero, yeah.
very minimal understanding. So it is relative, right? But from what you were explaining to me and how much you understood, it sounded like you knew about higher than 50% or were familiar with higher than 50% of the stuff that I've learned so far.
Most of the things you're going to learn in college is very theoretical and not very practical. And so like taking that and being able to apply it is like an important skill. But also, you're right.
Yeah.
Like if you look at it just from a practical sense of like, am I going to be able to invest in the stock market after I'm a finance major? No. Not really. But like it gives you the tools to be able to learn how to.
Yeah, tools and resources.
Right. So that's why after college is like a whole new learning process, because you're actually learning how to apply those things that you learned in like a theoretical sense that like, and you know, some teachers are better than others. And if you actually pay attention in class and know what a WACC is or know what like a freaking discounted cash flow is, maybe it's more helpful. But I mean, and you'll definitely learn some good things. But like you said, realistically, like if you listen to this whole podcast, you probably know like the terms at least.
yeah.
And you understood it, and you'd probably know like the terms at least of what you're going to learn in finance class. Yeah. You might not know how to do a discount cash flow or like a sensitivity analysis, but like,
yeah, how much? It's all relative.
You're also a sophomore, so you still got more to go. All your most important finance classes are later.
Not really.
Really?
Well, because
Oh, you took all of them already?
Yeah. Well,
he's already ahead of the curve then. Maybe you should have been paying attention instead of whizzing through them then.
on this note, we will cut it here. Thank you again. And for all you guys listening, have a great rest of your day, rest of your night, whatever it may be.